It's movie day on the Young Turks, as you guys know. Fridays usually is. John Kim's here from Rethink Reviews. We're going to do our lib political reviews. I love calling it that. We're going old school today. We're going Born on the 4th of July. So John's got the review first, then we come back with interesting facts, because that's what we do on this show. Let's watch.
Break the whole neighborhood! Wake them up! Kill them!
Cusack's, Carmelites, Walsh's! You kill them all! Kill them all! What they did to me! What they did to this whole block, this whole country!
They're gonna call the police
We
this
went
time.
to Vietnam to stop communism. We shot women and children.
You didn't shoot women and children. What do you say?
What said the war? Communism, the insidious evil. They told us to go.
Yes, that's what they told us.
Thou shalt not kill, Mom. Thou shalt not kill women and children. Thou shalt not kill, remember? Isn't that what you taught us? Isn't that what they taught us?
Stop it! Stop it! I don't want you in this house. You're out of this house.
Ron, come on now. You made your point, now stop. No! I haven't made my point. You tell her, Dad. They're killing everyone now.
I didn't force you to go.
Yes, you did! Yes, you did!
Oliver Stone's Born on the 4th of July will always have a special place in my heart. It came out in 1989 when I was just 13, and it was the first drama I'd ever seen that really moved me. In fact, it moved me so much that I wrote a review of it for my junior high newspaper, the first movie review I ever wrote. But when the issue came out, the school was flooded with angry calls from parents who couldn't believe that a junior high paper could encourage kids to see such a movie. At the time, I found this to be really confusing. After all, if I, as a 13-year-old, could be touched by this true story of Ron Kovic, a conservative, all-American boy who was paralyzed in Vietnam and forced to question and confront his faith in God, country, and government, why wouldn't my fellow students feel the same way? Of course, in hindsight, the film is a hard R, with graphic violence, drug use, some pointed politics, and the whole Lost Year in Mexico part where all Kovic does is drink tequila, have sex with hookers, and swear. So it makes more sense now. But Born on the 4th of July is probably my favorite Oliver Stone movie, and it's by far the best thing Tom Cruise has ever done. Now, at a time when we're stuck in another needless, unwinnable war, with Republicans and teabaggers claiming they alone can define what makes a true patriot, Born on the 4th of July is a movie that deserves to be seen.
The film starts with Kovic as a little boy growing up on Long Island, and Tom Cruise, in a performance that earned him an Oscar nomination he really deserved to win, plays Kovic from high school all the way into middle age. Young Kovic, who seems destined for great things, volunteers for Vietnam with the encouragement of his conservative and very religious mom, and joins the Marines, not wanting to miss out on a chance to fight a war, defeat communism, and prove his patriotism. But as everyone was to find out, Vietnam would prove to be a confusing, grinding debacle, where Kovic saw the horrors of war firsthand before being paralyzed from the chest down. He returns to the U.S. to face rehabilitation in an appalling VA hospital, and the reality of a country whose citizens had either turned against the war or no longer cared that we were fighting it. Alienated from his family and everyone else, Kovic heads to Mexico, where he falls in with a group of expat Vietnam vets who have abandoned the States to live out their days drinking, playing cards, and sleeping with hookers. But after hitting bottom and realizing that he doesn't want to die a drunken whoremonger, Kovic returns to the U.S., attempts to make amends for the wrongs he's done, and becomes a leader in the anti-war movement, where he and several other veterans famously took the floor during Richard Nixon's acceptance speech at the 1972 Republican National Convention in Miami. Oliver Stone, who won the Best Director Oscar for Born on the 4th of July, described the film as a story about a boy who grows up with certain beliefs about America and thinks that being an American hero means being a war hero. But when confronted with the realities of war, how unheroic it truly is, and the loss of his body, then going through a personal hell as his country, his government, his religion, and even his family abandon him, this boy grows up to become a better man and a different kind of hero, fighting for America in a different and more important way than he ever thought he would.
And that's what I continue to love about Born on the 4th of July, over 20 years since I first saw it. How it shows the difficult, painful process that many of us go through, especially progressives, to see our country for what it truly is, to recognize and seek forgiveness for its crimes, and redefine our sense of patriotism. To recognize that America is not an infallible god or mommy figure the way conservatives see it, and that we're not babies or worshippers in its thrall who dare not question it. And that to be a true patriot, we have to take responsibility for this country and fight like hell, sometimes against our own government, to ensure that America's actions always reflect its values. I'm Jonathan Kim, and this is a Rethink Review.
All right, John, I want to get into that idea of patriotism and what it means to be a hero in a second. But first, I'm curious, whatever happened to Kovic?
So Kovic is still very active. Actually, on March 20th, he led the LA anti-war rally that was against Iraq and Afghanistan as well as Palestine. Yeah, he's very active. He's been arrested 12 times, and let's see, he spoke at the 1976 Democratic National Convention, and continues to you know, to be just an advocate for peace. He continues to write and speak at events. But
So he's not a big fan of the Iraq or Afghanistan war.
no, he's not.
Okay, all right, that's a fair conclusion. All right, now let's talk about patriotism. You made a really interesting point towards the end there, where Republicans view the country as like their mom. Expand on that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Because I think like Republicans they're like babies, and America is mom, and it's everything, and it's all that you know, and it's the center of the world, and you can't question it or anything. Whereas I think Democrats and progressives see the country as more like it's a work in progress. It's like your friend, or maybe even like a child, you know, where it's like you need to make sure that it grows up and becomes the thing that you want it to, that it reflects your ideals. Whereas, you know, I think like with Republicans, they want to go back. They sort of want to go back to sort of the childlike innocence of just, oh, America is just everything. It never does anything wrong. And the idea that you would ever point out something wrong that America did, like Vietnam or killing all the American Indians, that's somehow attacking, it's like attacking your mom.
No. You know, I don't know why. I've never heard it quite put that way. And I love that. I think that nails it. Because when you say stuff like that, to me, it seems perfectly rational. Yeah, I mean, that's what happened with the Native Americans, but we got better, and that's what's great about this country. Whereas when you tell a Republican that, he says, what'd you say about my mama?
Right.
Okay.
There you go, blaming America first, you know.
And the other part that I like is that you've called them like little children. They're a child. Tell me about how they view patriotism.
Okay, well, there was an interesting poll that was actually from 2007, but that sort of looked at trends in patriotism. And at the time, in June 2007, 62% of Americans described themselves as very patriotic, with 33% saying they were somewhat patriotic and 5% saying they weren't patriotic. It went up to 72% after 9/11. And some other trends, patriotism increases with age. These are people who self-identify, obviously. It was higher in the Midwest and South than in the Northeast and West. And Republicans consider themselves more patriotic. 76% of them said they were very patriotic, with 53% of Democrats saying they were. And conservatives were 24 points more likely than liberals to describe themselves that way.
Well, I go another direction, because I think I'm the real patriot. And I think conservatives don't understand what it means to be a patriot.
I totally agree. I mean, like, for me, as a child of immigrants, I think that I understand this country in a way that someone whose family's been here for generations will never understand it. They'll never have the appreciation that someone like me or that my parents would. I mean, they've really kind of gotten all the fruits of what America is.
You know, it's cliched to go to a cabbie story. I feel like Tom Friedman when I do it. Okay. But it's true. I was in a cab coming back from the airport just when I came back from the UK trip. And we had an Armenian cab driver, and he said when he left Armenia, he spent some time in Germany and Sweden and then came here. And I said, what do you like better? He said, I like here a lot better. I said, that's interesting. Why? He said, it's actually safer in Germany and Sweden. What he meant by safer is not your personal security, but there's a bigger social welfare net. So you're not gonna, you're not gonna go hungry or you're not gonna, fall ill and not be able to take care of yourself, etc. So Germany and Sweden had that huge advantage over America, but he still liked America better. And I said, so what is it? And he said, it's because over there, you're not one of them. Germany is about Germans. Sweden is about the Swedes. And you're an outsider, and you'll always be an outsider, okay? And it's not a knock on them, it's just the way it is, right? Whereas in America, America is about us, all of us, right? And
well, you're clearly not a Republican, because don't you know America is for white people? Come on, get with it.
No, but that to me is real patriotism. That's a real understanding of this country, and you're right. Maybe it's just such a immigrant perspective, right? And so when these guys say you don't question the country, well, then you fundamentally misunderstand the country.
Right.
Then you're not a real patriot because you don't know what it means to be an American.
Right.
Part of what's great about America is that we do question the country. So, and I love movies like this that remind you of that.
Yeah, and I think with also what I find strange about Republicans is it doesn't even seem to me like while they worship the country, they don't really believe in a country. They think that we should be like 300 million separate nation states. That where if you maximize your own personal greed, that's what's better for everyone. We basically shouldn't have a government, that unelected corporations should run everything, and that you shouldn't really care about other people, which is really odd. Yet, obviously, when push comes to shove, I mean, what we're most proud of is, oh, those selfless people who, police officers and firefighters and public servants, like, we kind of revere them, but then, obviously, like with Sonia Sotomayor, it's like empathy, caring about other people, thinking about someone else's feelings. What a terror. We can't have that in our country.
Right. Earlier in the show, we did a segment on Perfect Republican from Tennessee, who's like, well, if they're unemployed, why don't they get a job?
Yeah, it breeds laziness, like if you get unemployment checks.
Yeah, no, it drives me crazy. But you talk about, or we did off air a little bit about soldier worship, right? And I think that there's a very rational reason for it. They put their lives on the line, et cetera, et cetera. But you think that the country's a little carried away with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I find it really hard that even people who are against the war kind of worship the soldiers. Oh, well, they're over there risking their lives for our freedom, for us. Mm-hmm. But they're not. And it's like if your friend was going to make a horrible mistake and thought it was the right thing to do, even though they thought it was the right thing to do, you shouldn't necessarily support them. Like if your best friend's like, well, I think my neighbor wants to kill me, so I'm going to kill them first. And it's like, well, that's not true. It's like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to say, well, you're such a good friend, you really stick by what you're going to do.
You're a hero.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, look, of course, the thing is, it's not the soldier's fault. They get sent on a mission, right? And when I'm here, or from my perspective, it's that they're not really defending our freedom because they got sent on a fool's errand. It's not their fault, but a fool sent them, right? It was literally a fool's errand. And so they're not defending our freedom in that sense. And, Hurt Locker was an interesting movie because it kind of, one of the messages was, look, that guy was doing it, the main character in the movie, because he liked it, right? And so, I mean, he's risking his life for us, kind of, but also for himself, etc. Now, the thing is, nonetheless, they risk their lives, and you absolutely, positively, obviously need soldiers, etc. It's a part of how we defend our democracy. I have a tremendous amount of respect, but I think part of the reason that people push that soldier worship beyond what is reasonable, what I think is, my reasonable high regard for soldiers, is because then it allows for more wars. It's part of the military-industrial complex. Like
the idea of you have to support the troops, which also support the mission.
Exactly, which is just a way of diverting you into supporting a war, right? And so that's the trick they're playing on you. It's not because they care more about the soldiers than we do. No, oftentimes they care a hell of a lot less about the soldiers. That's why they send them in harm's way so they can make money on ridiculous missions. Right. But they get to cover it in the cloak of support the troops. Right. So now,
I mean, one thing about Ron Kovic, he said, growing up in Long Island, that he was ultra patriotic and loved John Wayne and really wanted to be a war hero. And there's a part in the movie that's really interesting because when he got his wound that paralyzed him, first he got shot in the foot. And he could have, at that point, he could have left the battlefield. But instead, he kind of jumped up and he was thinking about John Wayne and what he was like when he was a kid, playing army in the forest. And he was just shooting at everyone. And then that's when he got paralyzed. And in the movie, there's this amazing scene where Tom Cruise is back at home, and he's like, I could have just laid down. He's like, but I was just so stupid. Like, what difference does it make if I thought I was going to be a hero and and take on the whole Viet Cong by myself? He's like, it doesn't matter now. And I would give up all of that to have my body back. And Oliver Stone actually brings up that Ron Kovic was a virgin when he went to fight, and was a very strict Catholic, so probably didn't have sex with hookers, and so probably never had sex in his life. So I would be protesting something if that happened to me.
You know what? Look, I forgot that scene in the movie. That's a really powerful scene because I also saw it 20 years ago, of course. And I think if we have it, I'd love to do it in the postgame today. New York Times is this amazing picture slideshow of the bedrooms of soldiers that didn't come home. And they're like 19 and 20 years old, and you look at their empty bedrooms, and it's nearly impossible not to cry. I mean, what did those lives go for? I mean, now we're in the middle of Afghanistan and Iraq. Did a story on Afghanistan, excuse me, that Matt Hope brought to our attention. When we leave, the locals fight the Taliban.